My name is Brianna, and I welcome you to the Tales of Adventure, a D&D podcast like no other.
My name is Nick, and I play Relic, a warforged cleric, on the D&D actual play podcast called Know Your Role. That's ROLL.
Not every day I see a warforged in a bar. What are you doing here?
Salutations. I am Relic, and I am certainly not here observing any strange behavior or peculiar figures in this bar. I am simply enjoying the atmosphere.
And where are you from?
I am from the Grimforge clan in the Sunset Mountains, far from here. I have come here with some friends who are not here with me today, but have not tasked me with keeping an eye out for things. Inquiry, what are you doing here?
My name is Istra. I have business in the area, and I'm just looking for a change of scenery. I'm also curious. I've heard rumors of the Whispering Blades, and so I just figured I'd wander around, see if I pick up any information.
Well, I, Relic, have certainly never heard of any organization known as the Whispering Blades. I wouldn't know where to begin to tell you anything about a secret order located here in Baldur's Gate named the Whispering Blades.
What do you know about this area?
Well, from my brief time here, it seems to be quite a metropolis filled with what some might call both hustle and bustle, and very different types of people here. It is somewhat refreshing, but at the same time frightening. I met my first fellow warforged here in this very bar. That fellow right over there, B4 Tender.
Oh, yes. I'm familiar with him.
Yes, well, it was admittedly quite a shock to my system to see such a figure as myself, since before arriving here in Baldur's Gate, I had never seen another such as myself. But beyond that, and the somewhat hectic style of our arrival here in the city, I'm not sure if you heard about it or not, but the runaway train from Arabelle, we arrived in some distress, and I did not have much time to explore the city before arriving here in the Elsong Tavern.
I did hear about that. I was almost on that train, but I got held up by some acquaintances who decided to go get themselves in trouble. I guess that did work out in my favor.
Observation. I would say it is quite fortunate that you were not on that train, for the probability is quite high that you would have found yourself to be murdered and then reanimated as an undead corpse to attack us and my fellow adventurers.
So there was a necromancer on the train.
No. That is simply a rumor that I had, of course, heard. I would not know anything about such a necromancer named Malone. I mean, anyone.
And what were you and your party doing on the train?
We were, how do I put this? The others would probably say I shouldn't be speaking to you, but there's something about you that seems trustworthy. Wait a second. My friend Jeff says that if you're a cop, you have to tell me. You're not a cop, are you?
No, of course not. I'm not even from here.
Okay, well then I don't see what the harm is. Well, yes, it actually feels quite good to get some of this off my forge. We were sent here by a known associate of the Whispering Blades, who had witnessed some of our own adventures in the town of Arabelle and suggested that we come here to Baldur's Gate to inquire about joining the Whispering Blades. But on that train, we were waylaid. Well, I should say we were surprised to find in the morning a person had been murdered, and it led to a sort of mystery, of one might say, as we attempted to assist in discovering who had done such a thing. And well, one thing led to another. A child turned out to be a necromancer, murdered the rest of the train, and brought them back to life. And then their associate attempted to run that train into Baldur's Gate.
I'm surprised to find that most of the rumors I heard were, in fact, true.
Confession, I must admit that we were not exactly inconspicuous upon our arrival in town. My companion Gorlax Batista used his immense strength to punch a hole through the train wall as we arrived in the city, and quite loudly announced us to the crowd as we made our way through and escaped before the arrival of the city watch.
I imagine that made quite the impression.
Yes, and my party members tell me that the decapitated ogre head that I had strapped to my back for, I believe, about 2 weeks now, also probably attracted some attention. I've since discarded it, but I did not realize that it would be such a strange or peculiar sight to those of the common world.
Why exactly did you have it strapped to your back?
Well, back at the Grimforge clan, the dwarves that patrol the mines would often bring back trophies of their kill, perhaps a cloaker worn upon their back as a cloak, or a tentacle from a displacer beast. And well, after our party defeated the ogre outside the town of Fardsbottom, it seemed only appropriate to bring it with us as proof of our great deeds.
I guess that makes sense.
I only realized later that I had access to a spell through my clerical powers known as a gentle repose, which would have spared us the decomposition of the head and probably significant societal judgment. But, well, you know what they say, when the metal is cool, there's nothing to be done.
I've heard that phrase. I haven't heard of many other warforged clerics before.
Admission, I do believe that I am somewhat unique in my current pursuits as a cleric of Moradin. I understand that the vast majority of his believers tend to be dwarves. And although I appear as a warforged in my metal and wood frame, I am at my heart a dwarf. I understand that is likely difficult for others to understand given my appearance and the affect of my voice. I lack the brogue of my brethren, my bearded brethren, but in my forge, I do feel as if I am a dwarf, and Moradin has welcomed me into his halls in quite an amazingly tolerant fashion, I must say.
I'm glad to hear that.
Do you have a god?
Not a particular one, but I'm on good terms with many of them.
Well, perhaps you would just take this pamphlet of Moradin. My companion Gorlax helped me put it together. Just something to think about, some reading materials, as they say. Moradin is quite an amazing god, and one, although I know there are many, I often do what I can to spread his gospel, as they say. So perhaps you would just take this and consider it.
Sure. I'm always curious to learn more.
I too am quite curious. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I have been so excited to explore this world. Although I left my home under less than admirable circumstances, meeting my new friends and learning these many new things has really been quite the experience for me. I spent the last 2 years living as what some would call, I believe, a hermit.
And what caused that?
Well, my fathers, who found me abandoned in the Underdark and are the ones who brought me back to life, they feared that the rest of the world would not understand me. And they spent the last 2 years trying to teach me how to acclimate and assimilate into other cultures. But I must confess that if what my party members have told me, I am not exactly as adept at doing so as I once thought. Although, as you can see from my relaxed stance now, I look to be just another patron of this bar. And this beer that I am about to drink is quite tasty.
Pretending to be something different is always challenging, but takes time and practice, and you're doing rather well.
Appreciation. That is a nice thing for you to say. I was eventually, well, I don't really talk about this much, but it turns out while my fathers attempted to protect me from the outside world, it was actually those inside the clan who would be my undoing. There were several members of the clan council who felt that my skill with the hammer and the forge had begun to exceed even the most skilled crafters of the clan, and that I was perhaps some sort of abomination and not fit to be a part of the clan. And before any more drastic measures could be taken in regards to my deconstruction, my fathers smuggled me out of the clan and gave me supplies, including this very hammer I carry on my back, and told me not to come back for some time while they sorted things out.
Oftentimes, people do fear that which they don't understand. I'm sorry, though, to hear that it, at least for now, has cost you your home.
Yes, and I do miss my fathers dearly, but now that we are here in Baldur's Gate, I understand that there may be spellcasters who have access to magic that might allow me to communicate with them once more, and so I do so hope at some point to have access to such spells. I would very much enjoy speaking with them once more.
It is definitely a possibility if you know who to talk to.
And might I ask, Isra it is, correct?
Yes.
You say that you are here to learn more about the Whispering Blades.
Yes, I often travel striking up conversations with different adventurers, and it's an organization that I would like to know more about.
Well, I do believe that I am under some sort of confidentiality agreement regarding the Order's specific members and location, but I can't imagine that it would be detrimental for me to speak of their good works.
I would love to hear about it, but only what you feel comfortable sharing.
Well, we are relatively new to the Order, and I this brooch that I have here beneath my vestments, as you can see, the finger over the lips, as if to keep a secret, speaks, I think, to their secretive nature. But from what little I know so far, they seem to be focused on doing good here in the world and rescuing those, such as my party, who begin to come into any sort of adventuring fame or power. Perhaps, supposedly, though I am new to the overworld here, many adventurers like us seem to come to some sort of ill ends soon after beginning to gather any sort of renown. And this order seems to specialize in finding those people and bringing them in to protect them.
I can admire that. I've known many a well-intentioned adventurer to, as you said, meet ill ends.
Yes, and perhaps in the future you might be able to direct some of them to seek out the blades, for we have found them to be most accommodating, even going so far as to accept us as what I believe the group refers to as subcontractors, not wanting to exist under the name the Whispering Blades alone. We have chosen to call ourselves the Slippery Swords, which is a name that brings much laughter and humor to the others in the group. I'm not quite sure I understand it, as a slippery sword seems as if it would not be very useful to the wielder.
I believe they're viewing it as a sort of euphemism, a reference to something else that is potentially considered inappropriate.
This seems like it could be very true. My companions are often what you would call inappropriate.
It's a normal thing among people who adventure a lot. You have to have a weird sense of humor to deal with how crazy things get and how weird it gets.
This is true. While I found them to be somewhat disconcerting at first, when first we met on the wagon in the town to Fard's Bottom, I have, slowly but surely come to consider them my closest friends. Neko, in particular, my shifter friend, similar to me, was also here almost as an outcast. We have not met many others of her kind, and like me, she is somewhat new to this world, and so I think her and I have found sort of a special bond.
I've noticed shifters do tend to keep to themselves.
Yes, she can keep to herself, but she also helps keep us on the right track. When Jeff and Gorlax and I are often off on our own little antics, she often finds a way to whip us back into shape. Not quite literally, as the whip she wields, Coil Baby, is quite deadly and would likely cause severe damages to my system if she were to use it on me.
She's probably well aware of that fact, but I would be curious to know where she got it. Weapons like that are rare and can be valuable and useful in the right hands.
Admission. I too would like to know where she came into possession of the weapon. She actually had it on her person when first we met. But here's the interesting thing. Recently, when we battled a creature known as a Yuan Ti, when her whip drew blood from one of them, it seemed to awaken and speak into her mind, much in the same way that Moradin speaks into my own mind. And Neko has shared with us that she was somewhat disconcerted by this, but she believes that whatever she did seems to have awoken the weapon itself. It's quite an interesting work of craftsmanship as well. The hilt itself appears as a snake head. As someone who typically works more with iron and steel, I am not quite as familiar with those working in leather and other such softer materials, but I recognize great craftsmanship when I see it.
Definitely sounds like something that is enchanted, if not binding some sort of living conscious to it.
Well, as someone who sometimes feels as if I have been bound as a living conscious to this construct you see here, I would be curious to learn more myself.
Do you not know much of where you came or how your people came to be?
Sadly, I know nearly nothing of where my people came from, much less myself. According to my fathers, they found me while they were on a expedition into the Underdark. I was abandoned in some sort of collapsed tunnel. They saw me by the torchlight glinting off my frame, and returned me to the clan, where through a religious ceremony to Moradin, they actually rekindled the forge in my chest. Upon doing so, I awoke with no memory of who I was or where I came from, and they could only tell me that they had found me. Until I met B4 Tender over there, I had never met another warforged like myself. So I'm unsure if we were created by the Allfather, by someone else, or what my true purpose in life really is.
Well, perhaps your true purpose is whatever you decide to make it.
That's an interesting way to look at things. I will have to consider this.
Yes, there it is, whatever it is you were created to do, and whatever you choose to do with your ability.
Well, I've done what I can to do good, but I must confess to you, Isra, I have had doubts. Many of the acts of good that I have attempted to accomplish have actually resulted in more harm, including what occurred on the train. The child necromancer, when first we subdued him, the rest of the party wanted to execute him without any judge, any jury, and I objected. And the party did relent. We tied him up and kept someone to watch over him, and not 2 or 3 hours later, he escaped, killing his captor, killing the others on the train, and resurrecting them as undead abominations. And I, of course, assisted the parties in vanquishing them and hopefully freeing their souls. But I have been asking myself ever since that perhaps I made the wrong decision in granting mercy to that necromancer.
I see it. Unless you truly know someone to be truly evil with no possibility of changing or gaining control of their darkness, mercy is never the wrong choice. There is no way you could have known what that child would do, and he was just a child.
Exactly. That was my original supposition, was that if this had been some gnarled, old, grizzled necromancer of ancient age that perhaps had had an entire life to consider his decisions, I might have felt differently, but it never struck me as right. But when I saw the madness in Malone's eyes there at the end, I knew that there was no hope for him, and I was not the one who struck the final blow. But it is still something that has haunted me to this day.
To come into that kind of power at such a young age.
It's frightening.
There could have
Honestly,
been
and
a chance that he could have been brought back, but there's usually no way of knowing.
yes.
It's
Well,
difficult, and I wondered how he came across the knowledge required to be a necromancer.
I do as well. I actually still have his arcane focus here in my belongings, which I've been meaning to take to a magical practitioner of some sort to have it assessed to see if perhaps it was cursed and maybe that's what made him do the things that he did. But in the future, I must admit, while I will always look for mercy and look for justice, I will confess that now I will think twice, and it's a difficult realization to come to, but I will still try and do good. And as you said, I will try and perhaps find my own purpose, or make my own purpose, rather than spend my life looking for.
A common practice I find is trust but verify.
Interesting. I will have to log that in my databanks as a saying to return to.
Situations like that, as I said, it's hard, but you did the right thing binding him and leaving with a guard with him. Normally, children would not be that powerful, but I suspect he had more power dumped into him than he was ready for, but was somehow able to channel it at least, which is how he was so dangerous.
Yes, yes. And I suspect you are correct. We have only heard rumors of them, whispers along the way, but there is some other order out there, counter to our own, known as the Pillars. And we don't know much about them, but the necromancer's companion I spoke of, the one who set the train to run rampant into the city, who's an Aarakocra named Larry, he, in his final moments, warned us that the Pillars were coming for us and that we didn't stand a chance. And I very much intend to find these Pillars and find out what connection they had to what happened on that train. I suspect this boy was lured into their grasps and granted this power in such a way that he was not prepared for, as you said. But
Child might not even have realized what he was doing.
it's true. And I would warn you that in your adventures, if you have any encounters with anyone connected with these Pillars, to guard yourself. They seem to be quite dangerous.
I'll have to keep that in mind and see what information I can beat out of them about who they are and what they're doing.
Yes, yes. Well, I would very much appreciate any information like that in the future if ever you find yourself back here at the Elf Song Tavern.
I will make sure that it gets to you. See what I can do. So, I'm curious, how did you meet your companions?
Well, that was an interesting coincidence. We each, the four of us, Jeffrey, my warlock companion, Jeff. Jeffrey is not his full name. That is a mistake I often make. His full name is Jeffica. I have still, to this day, been somewhat confounded by his full name, but I must respect it. So, Jeffica, our tiefling warlock companion, Gorlax, our Goliath blood hunter, and of course Neko, my shifter rogue friend. While I don't like to classify people in some sort of way, it seems as if people find it helpful when you call yourself something like a cleric or a rogue or a fighter, and so that is what we must do. And the four of us, we each received a letter from someone inviting us to the town of Fardsbottom, informing us that there were some sort of monster or creature terrorizing the town, and they were looking for someone to come and vanquish said foe. And I can't speak for the others, but I received this letter while staying at a small inn in a abandoned supply room because I didn't want to attract any attention. I'm not actually sure how the messenger found me, but the four of us met on a caravan from Arabelle on the way into Fardsbottom, and that's when we first introduced ourselves to one another, and I met Gorlax loudly playing his bagpipes. That was actually my first interaction with the group.
I've never been a fan of bagpipes.
You know, as a dwarf, as a warforged raised among dwarves, I've always found them to be soothing reminder of my culture, but I must say, Goliath bagpipes are made to be significantly louder than dwarven bagpipes, and so it did take what I would call an adjustment period to acclimate myself to Gorlax's unique volume.
I once traveled with a Goliath who had bagpipes. They fell into the fire one night at camp. It's very unfortunate.
Inquiry. The Goliath or the bagpipes?
The bagpipes.
Ah, yes. Well, I can imagine Gorlax would be quite upset if his bagpipes were to end up in my forge one night, but we'll see. He's continuing to make a name for himself, and, well, I think that in not too much time, the slippery swords will become synonymous with the sound of his bagpipes coming over the hill.
Well, the image of enemies running in terror at the sound of bagpipes is rather entertaining.
Exactly, so that seems to be the idea that he is going for.
Well, it's whatever works for him.
Yes, yes. So we arrived in the town of Fard's Bottom, and we saw that since each of us had received a letter, why not join together as a party? And since then, it's been some time, but we have slowly but surely come to be almost a family.
I'm glad you found them then, and who knows, perhaps one day they can help you learn more about your people and where they're from.
I do hope so.
I've run across several warforged, but I've never seen one with a forge built as a part of them as yours is.
Yes, it is strange. That, and as you see here, the blacksmithing equipment that can actually come out of my very frame itself, I seem to have been made with a purpose to create rather than destroy, which is something I take to heart. But I can only imagine sometimes at night when I'm in sentry mode, I do have dark thoughts about whether or not I could have been made for some other darker purpose to create weapons, which are then themselves used to destroy. And so back at the mines, I tried to specialize in creating tools for mining and crafting and shields. And occasionally, of course, I would have to make hammers for the dwarves that patrolled the mines, but I tried to focus on those which could create or protect.
As I said, it's not what you are made for, but what you choose to be.
This is true.
I rarely believe that fate is set in stone.
Well,
I
I
believe-
think if... Oh, excuse me, please, continue.
I believe some things may be a little more certain than others, but you can always choose how things come to be.
I think that is likely true, and if the fate of the slippery swords is written somewhere on a stone, I imagine Gorlax would use his hammer to crush that stone and forge our own path. He's quite straightforward when it comes to conflict resolution and such things.
Sometimes that can be very useful.
Yes, I find that each of our members of the party seem to bring something unique and useful to our little family here. Neko is able to apply a softer, more subtle touch, whereas Jeff is somewhat more the fiery type. He's quite good at thinking on what I believe they say the seat of his pants, or flying from it, one or the other.
The term is flying.
Ah, yes, flying, excuse me. I am still trying to make my way here in this world and understand all the strange euphemisms. Most of mine come from dwarves.
You were rather close. The rest will come in time, I have no doubt.
Yes, yes. And as I have told the others, I have only been conscious for just over 2 years, which I understand to be strange to many others here in this world, given my somewhat advanced state of development. But in many ways, I am still, I must admit, like a child in my understanding of the world. It was only a few weeks ago that I assumed the most common form of exchanging currency was through the mouth. That's how I paid our first caravan driver. I just assumed that it was a deposit. That's what I had heard my father say. They needed to go to the bank to make a deposit. And so I just assumed that that was how one made a deposit.
I wish I could have seen that.
Yes, it was quite the sight. Cletus, actually, the caravan driver, he ate the thing whole. I've never seen such a thing. But the party did eventually correct me in my ways, so I now pay by handing coins to others.
I imagine that goes much smoother, though not quite as entertaining.
Yes, yes. And there are many other examples I would be loath to admit of things that I either thought I knew the way to do or I modeled them after my companions, such as the windows you see here in the Elsong Tavern, which have been recently mended. were by myself were broken through by my fellow party members leaping through the windows, which is an unfortunate habit we seem to have taken on as a group. And thankfully, my clerical powers do allow me some gift of mending, and I have been able to ensure that we do not leave a trail of broken glass and panes in our wake.
I imagine there are many people who very much appreciate that.
Yes, the proprietor of this tavern in particular.
So, is your party investigating anything new around here, or?
Well, yes, we actually were recently sent on a information gathering mission to the town of Succomber. It was outside of this town, actually, that we ran into those Yuan Ti that I mentioned that attacked us. The pillars appear to have some sort of mobile base, which is a floating castle of some sort. And it had recently appeared over or near this town of Succomber. And so we were sent to investigate. And, well, when we arrived in town, it seemed as if there was something strange amiss. The entire town was covered in a mist, which, of course, prevented us from finding any sort of floating castle, and those who we attempted to ask about it seemed not to have any idea what we were talking about.
Odd. Maybe they were unable to perceive it.
Yes. Neko's keen senses detected that there seemed to be something that the inhabitants of the town were, this sounds strange, but listening to in the sky. She noticed occasionally people cocking their heads as if they were listening to a sound that none of us could hear. It was rather strange.
Some very strange and powerful magic going on there.
Yes, it certainly led to what I can only describe as a catastrophic chain of events, but I probably should not go into the details at this moment, given how recently they occurred. I would like to make sure we get to complete our debriefing back at the Whispering Blades beforehand.
That's probably a good idea, though I would be curious to hear more afterwards.
Yes, yes. Well, I can only tell you this, that there was definitely more to that town than met the eye, and that much of the danger came not from above, but from below.
Huh.
But I've probably said too much.
Invisible things speaking to mine coming from the Underdark.
This is true.
Would I be wrong in guessing a mind flayer might be behind this?
It was no mind flayer, but a creature far larger, though not quite as nefarious as a mind flayer. But I must say that the mind controlling influence was similar to that of these mind flayers you refer to. I have never encountered one, but the dwarves spoke of them as one of the most dangerous foes we could encounter in the Underdark.
Yes, they're nasty to deal with unless they're one of the rare friendly ones. Then they're still a little tricky, but mostly trustworthy. You just have to make sure they get dead, which is very gross to watch.
Yes, one of the recent travelers here, one of the patrons here in the Elsong Tavern, actually told me a strange tale of a mind flayer who works aboard a ship known as the Sea Monster, which had once docked here, and he said he was an inventor of some sort. I would be most interested to meet him one day.
I'd be interested as well. I do believe that there's someone over there trying to get your attention. Possibly one of the members of the organization that you say you don't know much about?
Yes. I should probably go and talk to that person who I don't know, just to see what they might have to tell me.
Very well. If you wouldn't mind mentioning that, I would be curious to speak with one of their more senior members. I'm just looking for more information. Give them my name. They've probably heard of me, or at least someone that knows me.
Yes, of course. Given our conversation today, I feel quite confident that I could convince someone that perhaps you might actually be able to do some good for the Whispering Blades and help find others like us.
I very well could. I'm also curious to know more about these pillars and just exactly what they're up to.
Yes, well, if you do, the one last thing I would warn you about is if you encounter a Mogogol, a frogman named Billups, just run.
Is he dangerous, or just don't trust the word he says?
Affirmation, yes. to both. Though we have not witnessed his fury, we have spoken to those who have, and his power apparently belies his simple appearance. So I just would caution you. I would consider you now a friend and would not want any harm to come to you.
I appreciate that. I consider you as a friend as well.
Well, it has been, I must say, a unique pleasure getting to speak to you and, again, get some of this out, off my forge, and it's been nice to speak to someone who's a stranger.
It has been my pleasure as well. Until we meet again.
Until we meet again, farewell.
Hello and welcome to St. Fleur, where the city is modern, the fantasy is urban, and the faction politics are at an all-time high. Join us in Shadows of St. Fleur as we follow the wizard, Alistair Lockwood.
Regret to inform you, I'm not a wizard. I am a master of the arcane arts.
The scholar, Jeremiah Roderick Crawford.
I'm an earl, you know. You're a baron. Those words carry some weight.
The wolf, Victor Margaret.
Victor stands on the bridge in the cold. Fuck.
The fae who is known only as Silk.
Do we know if this was a standard mugging?
And the vamp, Alex Giroux.
Quite. Because the first time the door opens, I'm going to push her out.
Through their experience in the city. Shadows of St. Fleur is an Urban Shadows actual play podcast with a majority LGBTQ+ cast playing characters finding their way through faction politics, all in pursuit of their own individual goals. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Tales of Adventure is directed and produced by me, Brianna Toiber, as part of Pseudonym Social, a creative podcast network. The music is by Patrick Chester of Chester Studios. To see more of his work, visit his website at chesterstudios.net. Find out more about Pseudonym Social by visiting our website at pseudonymsocial.wordpress.com. If you like what I'm doing and would like to support this podcast, please go to patreon.com/pseudonymsocial and choose one of the tiers connected to Tales of Adventure. You can also leave a review on iTunes to make our show easier to find for those who need it.